Hello everyone, this is Professor Steve Martin again with Des Moines Area Community College, and we're going to be covering Chapter 2 for CRJ 111, Police and Society, which will talk fairly quickly about the levels of law enforcement. Keep in mind that I do have a 15-minute time limit here, so I'm going to fly through this fairly quickly. Again, if you have any questions that ever pop up in any of these things, please email me, and I'd be happy to clarify anything I might say in here or answer any questions you might have. Okay, local police departments. The text started out talking about local police departments, and not a lot of people understand the law enforcement system in America is fairly fragmented, and the landscape consists of a lot of different types of law enforcement agencies, from police departments to sheriff's offices, in the rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas, but actually most law enforcement agencies in America are fairly small, under 10 officers, and it's very unusual to have what we would consider large law enforcement agencies like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, places like that. Those are kind of the exception to the rule in the United States. The difference between a sheriff's office and a police department primarily is that a sheriff's office is headed by an elected official, the sheriff, and their deputies are law enforcement officers that are hired by the agency. They're not elected. Only the sheriff themselves are elected. A police department, in contrast, is headed by a police chief who's appointed by the mayor and city council and serves at their pleasure, whereas the sheriff's office, or the sheriff, is up for election every 4 years. The other primary difference is that sheriff's offices' primary duties are to operate the county jail, whereas police departments, their primary duties are law enforcement. The sheriff's offices also do provide law enforcement services to rural areas, or areas outside of organized cities in a lot of cases, or they contract those services with communities that pay them for that. But in many parts of America, they do serve unincorporated areas. The difference between officers in rural areas and urban areas, they all have to basically meet the same standards to be hired. However, there's probably less diversity on rural departments. Most rural departments hire people that actually grew up in those areas and wanted to stay and serve their communities. The pay is less for rural officers, generally speaking, than it is in more urban areas, but usually the cost of living is higher in urban areas as well. But that's the big difference. So there's more diversity in hiring in urban locations too. Tribal policing, basically what this refers to is just policing that occurs on Native American reservations throughout the United States. There's, for instance, the Navajo Nation encompasses 4 states in the Southwest. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a federal agency, provides much of the law enforcement down there. There are also Indian reservations or tribal police in the Dakotas and even Wisconsin. What's interesting about this type of law enforcement is that they do have their own sets of laws and ordinances that are enforced by the tribal agency, and they have their own, if you will, criminal justice system to deal with violators of those types of laws. Special jurisdictions, again, there's going to be security agencies that might have police powers, especially at the federal level, Federal Protective Service, U.S. Capitol Police. Even the Federal Bureau of Investigation has a uniformed security force that patrols the building, the Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. So most agencies have law enforcement or security personnel that look out for the physical structures. DNR, that's going to be conservation law enforcement. That's usually facilitated at the state level, although in Iowa we do have county conservation officers as well, and they are state certified peace officers and have powers of arrest. Most public transportation systems in the United States have law enforcement as well that primarily provide police services to subways, trains, air modes of transportation. Some agencies primarily center on criminal investigations. For instance, the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation provides state-level investigations. Here in Iowa, they assist local agencies in investigations at the federal level. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as the other prominent federal agencies, are primarily investigative and regulatory agencies that do criminal investigations. And then there's other specialized enforcement departments too, such as um, like airport police, um, gaming. Uh, would be maybe even the Department of Agriculture would have some law enforcement officers. So there's a lot of specialization, especially at the federal level. State law enforcement agencies, their hierarchy consists of a state police highway patrol, and they're primarily out on the highways, handling accidents, doing accident investigations, and also um, enforcing traffic laws on the interstate highways and state highways that run through our various states. They do have a branch, like I said, that does conduct investigations, the Division of Criminal Investigation. There are um, conservation law enforcement officers, and also most states do have training academies that certify local law enforcement officers uh, to license them to be police officers in that particular state. And of course, these agencies also work with local law enforcement and also the federal law enforcement agencies that operate in their jurisdictions. Organizational models, I won't spend much time on this. I just wanted to mention that if you look at most law enforcement organizations at the local, state, and federal level, they are set up on a quasi-military system, whereas you have a hierarchy of authority where the head of the agency, whether it be a director, a commissioner, a police chief, a sheriff, is at the top. Their assistants are right below them, and then eventually it expands out into middle command, lieutenants, captains, sergeants, and then down to the operational or officer level. Um, and if you ever, you could just go on the internet and Google and see uh, how these agencies are organized. There's a lot of models out there. Liquor control boards just basically govern the dispensing, the sale, and consumption of liquor in their various jurisdictions. Looking at the federal level a little bit, like under Department of Homeland Security, the prominent agencies there are Customs and Border Protection, Immigrations, Customs Enforcement, Secret Service. Those agencies are amongst the 22 that were created post 9/11 under this newly formed Department of Homeland Security. Department of Justice takes in the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the U.S. Marshals Service, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And they all have specific duties. The U.S. Marshals, I've always said, kind of serves the federal court system, much like a sheriff does at the local county level. The marshals primarily are fugitive apprehension. They also do courthouse security at the federal level and serve several civil papers at the federal level. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They are the federal branch that are regulatory over firearms dealers. They also do investigations into illegal weapons violations and assist local agencies in fire and explosives investigations. And Drug Enforcement Administration, again, they do drug investigations at the federal level, but they're also a regulatory agency for pharmacies and so forth. And then the Federal Bureau of Investigation is the primary investigative branch of the Department of Justice. And again, these agencies are fairly narrow in scope as far as what they do, but they are the primary ones at the federal level. And again, just looking through, you can see the various types of things that they are responsible for at various levels of law enforcement. Again, investigations, uniformed. They're There's corrections officers at county jails and correctional facilities, federal court personnel. There's a lot of different duties out there. What we most often see, the most visible part of any law enforcement organization at the local and county and even state level, is the uniformed patrol um, level. Private security, they're a little different. There's actually about double the number of private security employees in the United States as there are publicly employed law enforcement officers, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people don't think that, but especially since post 9/11, there's been a lot more security agencies come into existence that actually contract with federal law enforcement and state law enforcement to provide security services to what would consider critical infrastructure. But anyway, private security, they don't have powers of arrest, but they are there to primarily asset protection and maintain security for their clients that would hire them to provide these services. And in some cases, they are armed and well trained. And you can just see we have private security people that are uniformed. We have private security people that provide cyber security and those types of functions, becoming very complex, and the requirements to become private security personnel, especially in cybersecurity, is becoming more stringent all the time, and it takes quite a bit of technical knowledge and training to achieve those things. But it tends to be that the money in such private security ventures, especially in specialized things like cybersecurity, is very good, especially for some of the major corporations. I still think local uniformed security personnel struggle to make much. And the text just talked about the difference between some of the things that happen at the levels between security and public law enforcement, and the difference between private security is that it's a business versus publicly funded law enforcement, where there's some things that they're required to do. On this side, security's not. And that's just some of the differences. And of course, training's a big deal too. Police require much more training than your entry-level security folks, but in some states, the security training aspect of things is becoming more prominent as we move forward in attempting to professionalize the profession. So anyway, that wraps up Chapter 2, and I hope you enjoyed this. And again, if you have any questions, please email me and let me know, and we'll be up with Chapter 3.